It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. The Vatican says Pope Francis is in a critical condition after suffering a respiratory crisis. The 88-year-old has now spent more than a week in hospital. We'll have the latest live from Vatican City. Also ahead, Hamas accuses Israel of delaying the release of more than 600 Palestinian prisoners as part of the ceasefire deal. And it comes after 6 Israeli hostages were handed over today, including 4 taken on the 7th of October attacks and 2 who've spent more than a decade held in Gaza. One person is killed in a knife attack in eastern France. President Macron calls it a terrorist act. Donald Trump says the U.S. is pretty close to a minerals deal with Ukraine, but Sky News understands Kyiv is not ready to accept. And the search continues for a missing 23-year-old woman in County Durham, last seen on Tuesday. Plus, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. Pope Francis is in a critical condition tonight, as the Vatican says his health has worsened in the last 24 hours. Doctors say the pontiff had a prolonged respiratory crisis and has been given blood transfusions as he continues to be treated for double pneumonia and chronic bronchitis. The 88-year-old has now spent more than a week in hospital. Sky's Lisa Holland reports from Vatican City.
At the Gemelli Hospital in Rome, there is grave concern for the health of Pope Francis, who has just undergone several blood transfusions and required high-level oxygen support in order to breathe. His condition is now critical. The Pope has slept away from the Vatican, the seat of power of the Roman Catholic Church, for over a week now. Taken to hospital with bronchitis, which turned to pneumonia in both lungs. The Vatican, in an off-camera briefing, told us, in their words, the prognosis for the Pope is yet to be determined. It is the first time Vatican officials have acknowledged the Pope may not survive. It's 2 weeks since 88-year-old Pope Francis was seen struggling to breathe, unable to finish his Sunday homily. He was outdoors and it was cold and damp, aggravating his already fragile health. Senior Vatican diplomat and long-time close confidant Vincenzo Paglia told us he is very worried about the Pope, but the pontiff has an inner determination to continue his mission to serve.
I hope that his resilience inside is a really great spirit. I think that his will to continue, his determination to stay with the others is a really important strength.
In St. Peter's Square, it was already dark and the daily crowds had dissipated when news began to spread that the health of the spiritual leader of the world's more than 1 billion Catholics had again deteriorated. But the lights of the Vatican have begun to draw devoted Catholics here to pray.
Everybody here is praying, like, you know, the community here, I felt like it's around like the situation, and I hope like he recovers very quickly. And yeah, but that's terrible news. I hope for the best.
Just scared. I'm really scared.
What are you scared of?
Scared we lost him, because I think it's a very good Pope. So we pray.
In the absence of reassurance, the Pope's faithful are seeking comfort in each other, hoping against hope he can survive. Lisa Holland, Sky News, Rome.
And Lisa joins us live now from Vatican City. Lisa, the Pope has been in hospital for just over a week, but the Vatican today using the word critical to describe his condition.
Yes, and that's absolutely the first time that we have had the use of the word critical, either from doctors or indeed from the Vatican itself. It's worth pointing out that the Vatican, such a guarded and cautious institution, has been very, very careful throughout the course of this week with its choice of words and its very few words. However, the Vatican spokesperson was, it had to be said, ashen-faced and looked quite emotional when he gave this update, an off-camera update, just a few hours ago, when he said that the Pope's condition is now critical, and he described what has clearly been a very, very difficult day for the Pope and all of his faithful and all those at the Vatican with this, as it was described, long asthmatic respiratory crisis, the need for several blood transfusions, all deeply worrying indeed. It has to be said that all of this is uncharted territory for the Vatican, in that, of course, popes have passed away over the years, but they've never passed away, if that were to happen, in hospitals. So that is clearly something which people are considering should the Pope not manage to recover from his current illness. We know that he has been in hospital for over a week now. We know that he was taken in with bronchitis, but that his condition deteriorated to the point on Tuesday when there was this bombshell announcement that he was suffering with pneumonia in both lungs. That said, talking to people close to him, they describe this inner strength, this inner determination to keep serving the people, which they hope will pull him through this health crisis. But for now, the world's Catholics are praying that he can survive.
Lisa Holland with the latest there from the Vatican. Lisa, for the moment, thank you. Hamas is accusing Israel of delaying the release of 600 prisoners today. 6 Israeli hostages were returned earlier, the last ones expected under phase 1 of the ceasefire deal. It follows a tense week which saw Hamas hand over a wrong body among the seized hostages. Well, in total, 184 hostages have been released by Hamas as part of the ceasefire agreements between the militant group and Israel, including the 6 released today. Tal Shoham, now 40 years old, is from a village in North Israel and was visiting his wife's family in Kibbutz Be'eri on the 7th of October 2023 when he was taken by Hamas. Omer Shem Tov, aged 22, 27-year-old Elia Cohen and 23-year-old Omer Wenkert were all taken from the Nova Music Festival. Avera Mengistu was one of the first hostages to be released today. Now, he was taken by Hamas after crossing into Gaza on his own in 2014. And Hisham al-Sayed was released by Hamas today privately. He's been held captive since entering Gaza in 2015. Hundreds of Palestinian prisoners are being released every week as part of the ceasefire deal. 620 Palestinian prisoners are expected to be released today. Among those set to be released is Nael Barghouti. He is the longest-serving prisoner after 43 years in prison. Barghouti was imprisoned for kidnapping and killing an Israeli soldier. Our international correspondent Diana Magnay reports now from Jerusalem.
After more than 500 days, the long-awaited reunions. How much I dreamt of this, you have no idea, says Omer Shem Tov as he hugs his parents. Cheers from the crowds for Tal Shoham and applause from the security services who brought him home. Their first sight of him finally on Israeli TV, almost too much for his brother Mor and his wife Adi. She was released from Hamas captivity in November 2023, along with her mother and 2 children. Averu Mengistu, in Hamas captivity for more than 10 years after he voluntarily crossed into Gaza in 2014, back with his family finally. There were 3 handovers, the first in Rafah for Tal Shoham and Averu Mengistu. Another in Nuseirat, in the center of the Gaza Strip, where Elia Cohen, Omer Shem Tov and Omer Wenkert were all brought to the stage. Young men in their 20s taken at the Nova Music Festival who couldn't contain their elation at their release. Omer Shem Tov especially beaming with joy, with kisses for the men who'd put him through this terrible ordeal. His family elated to see him at last.
He manages with everyone, even with Hamas. Even there, they would love him, and that's for sure.
Omar is home, and we can't be happier than this. Omar, you're the man, you're the king.
The sixth hostage, Bedouin Israeli Hisham al-Sayed, who'd also crossed into Gaza 10 years ago voluntarily, handed over privately because of his Arab-Israeli background. The other side of this deal, though, delayed. 620 Palestinian prisoners set to be released, 97 due for deportation, but little movement outside the Ofer prison in the occupied West Bank. Payback, perhaps, for a tense 24 hours after the remains of the Israeli hostage Shiri Bibas were finally returned from Gaza late on Friday night. After a body Hamas had said was hers, was not. Israel's Prime Minister is holding a security consultation to work out how to release the rest of the hostages, the living and the dead. Israel's fulfillment of its part in this deal contingent on that. Diana Megnay, Sky News, Jerusalem.
One person has been killed and several others injured in a knife attack in eastern France. The attack took place in the French city of Mulhouse near a canal-side market. The area borders Germany and Switzerland. Prosecutors say a 37-year-old man who was known to police has been arrested.
This
is a terrorist act that leaves no doubt that it's an Islamist terrorist act, given the expression of the terrorist. I would like to reiterate the nation's solidarity with the family and the government's and my own determination to continue the work we've been doing for the last 8 years to eradicate terrorism on our soil.
President Donald Trump said tonight the U.S. is pretty close to securing a deal for Ukrainian minerals, as he told a major conservative conference that America will get its money back. But it comes as Sky News understands, Volodymyr Zelensky is not yet ready to accept the deal, with Ukraine unhappy about a number of problematic issues. It follows an increasingly tense week between Washington and Kyiv. Let's bring in our correspondent, David Blevins, who's in Washington and was listening to that speech by the U.S. president. David, this deal over minerals, obviously very important to Donald Trump.
Yes, very important, but the signals are still a bit confused. Donald Trump says they're close to a deal. A source close to President Zelensky says they're not. And when you're in the context where the White House appears to be giving Ukraine the cold shoulder and astonishingly making overtures towards Russia, President Trump's speech to the Conservative Political Action Conference carried more significance than usual. And when he finally got to the tricky issue of Ukraine, he did have strong words, because even he knows that amid all the political theatre right now, words matter. Centre stage at the largest Conservative gathering of the year, a president making radical changes to US policy at home and abroad. For Donald Trump, the businessman, everything is transactional, even efforts to end the war in Ukraine.
I'm trying to get the money back that, or secured, because, you know, Europe has given $100 billion. The United States has given $350 billion because we had a stupid, incompetent president and administration. 350. But here's worse. Europe gave it in the form of a loan. They get their money back. We gave it in the form of nothing. So I want them to give us something for all of the money that we put up. But I think we're pretty close to a deal, and we better be close to a deal, because that has been a horrible situation. It would have never happened if I were president.
But President Zelensky is not ready to sign a deal, according to a source with knowledge of the negotiations. Sky News understands there are problematic issues with the draft agreement, granting America access to rare minerals as payback for wartime aid.
The United States is keenly aware just how dependent Ukraine is on aid from Washington. Yes, European nations could step in, but if the United States pulls that rug out from under Ukraine, the Ukrainians are in very serious difficulty. And I think we see President Trump wanting to bring the war to an end, even if those terms that would end it would be very favourable to Russia.
It's less a wind of change and more a political hurricane that's blowing through Washington. 8 decades of foreign policy swept away in the space of a week by a president who now also stands accused of bringing politics into the Pentagon. He's fired General Charles Brown, only the second black man to be chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Lisa Franchetti, the first woman promoted to Chief of Naval Operations. An unprecedented purge of what were considered apolitical appointees.
God bless America. Thank you.
There's nothing sacrosanct in Donald Trump's America, and the impact of his unconventional approach will have repercussions around the world. David Blevins, Sky News in Washington. So President Trump has two aspirations: to end the war, as he's long promised to, and to get back some of America's money. And despite the fact that the French President and British Prime Minister will both come to Washington next week to show support for Ukraine, right now President Zelensky seems a bit boxed in by America and may have little option at the end of the day but to sign up to this deal. That is astonishing for many people, but when you reflect on just how unconventional Donald Trump's politics are, both at home and abroad, it is important to remember the scale of his victory and to listen to the applause in the room today. He's doing radical things, but he's not doing them alone. He's a president with a mandate.
David Blevins with the latest from Washington. David, thank you. Well, meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer has continued to publicly show his support for Kyiv. In a phone call today with Volodymyr Zelensky, the Prime Minister said he will press the case for safeguarding Ukraine's sovereignty when he holds talks with Donald Trump in Washington next week. Well, our political correspondent, Rob Powell, is at the Scottish Labour Conference. Rob, what can we expect from the Prime Minister over the next few days?
So I think we are likely to hear about the international situation in Ukraine, despite the fact that this is the first time that Sir Keir Starmer has addressed Scottish Labour members at their conference as Prime Minister. Clearly it comes at the start of a really big week on the international stage for the Prime Minister. It is the first time, or it will be the first time on Thursday, that he meets Donald Trump after he became president for the second time. It's also the first time that he'll have met him since Donald Trump really tore up the US-Ukraine relationship as it stood and put the United States at odds with where the UK and many other European countries were on Ukraine. And today, Sir Keir Starmer has been speaking to other global leaders that share his view or agree with him on Ukraine rather than agree with Donald Trump. He spoke to the European Commission President, he spoke to the Finnish President, and also, of course, to Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian President as well. Number 10 issuing a statement after that call saying that the Prime Minister repeated his promise to Volodymyr Zelensky that Ukraine had to be at the centre of any peace negotiations, and crucially said that he would progress that discussion with President Trump in the coming days as well. We also know that on Monday, to coincide with the third anniversary of Russia invading Ukraine, there will be announcements from the UK related to support for Ukraine, but also restrictions and actions against Russia as well. So the UK government isn't trying to cloak its support for Ukraine, and it doesn't appear to be dialing it back at all in the face of what we have heard from President Trump. But I think the challenge for Sir Keir Starmer when he goes to Washington will be how he attempts to influence the president without triggering a bust-up, how he attempts to potentially try and bring him towards the way he and European partners think about this, without triggering a war of words as well. I think there's clues in how he may do that in an article that he's written for The Sun on Sunday tomorrow. I think it will involve essentially glossing over disagreements, accentuating where they agree, and also mixing in a hefty dose of flattery. The Prime Minister has talked about how President Trump is right to try and find a workable peace deal, that he believes he is committed to finding peace, but he has also written about how President Trump is right that Europe needs to take more responsibility for its own security. And there are rumblings this weekend that Keir Starmer may even use this trip to announce a long-awaited timescale for the UK to increase its defence spending as well. But be in no doubt, this moment in Washington is a big one for Sir Keir Starmer, and there are ample opportunities for it to go horribly wrong.
Rob Powell, thank you. Police say they're increasingly worried about a young woman who has been missing in County Durham since Tuesday. Rescue teams are searching the area for 23-year-old Jenny Hall, who was last seen leaving her home to go for a run. Sky's North of England correspondent Fraser Maud reports.
On the windy moors near Barnard Castle, the search for Jenny Hall is now into its 4th day. The 23-year-old was last seen at her home in Tow Law at 3 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon. Her parents reported her missing 6 hours later. Jenny is a keen cross-country runner. Her car was found parked near a moorland running trail, but there's been no sign of Jenny. Searches have also been carried out in nearby Hamsterley Forest, with police asking the public not to interfere.
We have officers and colleagues from Mountain Rescue out in Hamsterley Forest today carrying on that search activity. If we could just allow those officers the space to carry out their search and try not to disrupt that search area if we do see people out and about involved in that activity.
Mountain rescue teams from across the region are scouring the bleak moorland in the area where Jenny's car was found. 60 volunteers, 10 search dogs and 7 drone teams are being used to systematically cover a huge area.
It's hard going. I mean, you've got areas like this which are just grass, they're fine, you can cover them very easily. You keep going further back, you're suddenly into knee-deep heather. You've got bogs that you can disappear up to your waist in. And then further over there, where we were yesterday, you've got the whole Hamsterley Forest, which is just an absolute mass of tangled trees. You can push your way through there very, very slowly, but there is acres and acres and acres of it.
Again, the public are being asked not to get involved in case they leave false trails for the sniffer dogs. As well as the extensive physical search for Jenny out here on the moors, police are also conducting a digital search. They're investigating her mobile phone, her smartwatch and her running and fitness apps in the hope that they might lead to her location. So far, sadly, there have been no positive results. Durham Police says at the moment it has no reason to suspect any third-party involvement in Jenny Hall's disappearance. Meanwhile, the search for her goes on. Fraser Maud, Sky News, near Barnard Castle.
Bringing some breaking news now. The M4 motorway has been closed tonight in both directions after a body was found on the carriageway between junctions 20 and 21. Avon and Somerset police said they were called by several drivers reporting something in the road, and when officers arrived, they discovered human remains. We'll bring you more on that as and when we get it. A 3-year-old girl has died after a collision between a van and a tram in Manchester. Police said the girl was taken to hospital but couldn't be saved. Officers are appealing for witnesses after the van driver fled the scene. There have been demonstrations in Berlin today on the eve of the general election there. Far-right protesters were met by counter-protesters. Tensions are high between groups with differing views on immigration. Yesterday, a Syrian refugee was arrested after a Spanish tourist was stabbed near the Holocaust Memorial. Polls suggest that the far-right AfD party is likely to emerge second, an outcome which could have far-reaching consequences for Europe and beyond. Well, the snap election was prompted by the collapse of Chancellor Olaf Scholz's coalition. Here's how it will work. In total, there are 299 constituencies across 16 states. Ballots have 2 boxes to cross. For candidates to win their constituency, they need the majority of first votes, and their party needs enough second votes in the relevant state. Now, that determines the makeup of the Bundestag's 630 seats, where control depends on parties forming a coalition. Olaf Scholz's government was made up of his centre-left SPD, along with the Green Party and the pro-business Free Democratic Party. Well, this time around, the front-runners are the centre-right CDU, ahead of the far-right Alternative for Germany. CDU leader Friedrich Merz has ruled out forming a coalition with the AfD. So where could he turn? Well, there is his party's old centre-left rival, the SDP. Together, they could form what's known in Germany as a grand coalition, potentially with a third party like the Greens, if needed. Our Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins reports now from Berlin.
They say this is a battle for Germany's future, a last chance to stop the country making the wrong choice. Here, police hold down protesters fighting the far right, keeping them apart from this. A small group of mainly young, angry, right-wing demonstrators marching through the streets of Berlin, demanding change. The ruling parties do everything to suppress the opinions of the right wing of society and will not accept it anymore. We disagree with that. We're going out onto the streets, their leader Farhat tells me. Both sides are out because Germany is about to vote in an election where the far-right AfD party is polling second. Many in this group believe they're the future, but opponents say they're dragging the country back towards a dark past.
The AfD is a right-wing party that needs to be stopped.
They say that they're the best chance for Germany. What are you worried about?
They are not. They are just hating immigrants. It's just they are the worst. They want to promote fascism at its best.
This gives you an impression of just how emotional some people are feeling ahead of this election. On one side, we've got the anti-far right. On the other, we've got those who support them. Divisions which are opening up across this country.
Immigration is one of the topics fueling those divisions, following a string of attacks by migrant suspects, including in Munich last week. The AfD denies being racist or extremist. And while they didn't organise this march, we saw right-wing supporters do a gesture often used to express white power.
Some of the people in the crowd have been doing the white supremacy signal. Yeah, some of them were doing it. Why?
No, it's cold, and they say it's okay. It's okay to start to march. It's not for white power, no.
Because that's what it means, white power.
This is okay.
Despite the denials, this rise of the right is exactly what some Germans fear. Shame, this woman shouts at the demonstrators below. As voters prepare to pick their sides, the distance between them is growing. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News, Berlin.
Let's get the latest sport now from Sky Sports News and Nick.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
You got more chance of winning the lottery than making it as a professional footballer.
Players now, they have much more responsibility.
I've heard all the stories, anecdotes from old friends.
I think your responsibility is to guide them in the same direction as I went myself.
The route to the very top.
Everyone would like to be a footballer, but there's only a certain few of us that are lucky enough to go and be that.
Young people devastated once they've been released.
I'm forever searching for Matthew.
I've seen how the academies work.
Success is reaching your full potential.
From different areas of the pyramid.
Thank you to everyone at Exeter for all you've done for me.
It's clear this country is producing good players. But are we giving them the whole package? I want to help. I decided to get some more advice on education. This is Bryanston School in Dorset. Richard Jones is the headmaster here and has some big ideas that could work in football. Even Premier League clubs visit here, looking at the work they do around mentoring pupils.
Our approach here at Bryanston is that we have a one-to-one tutor approach. So when a pupil joins Bryanston, we take the time to understand them better before they actually begin with us. And then once we know what they're like as a character, what their interests are, what their passions are, what their background is, then we allocate them a member of staff that we think they're going to form a really good connection and relationship with. So that member of staff then stays with them as their tutor for their hopefully their whole 5-year period that they're with us.
How much do you think the kids lose touch with other parts of their life as youngsters?
Football academies start so early, far earlier than academies in any other sport. The demands on their time is significant right from an early age.
And parents.
And parents. Now, you take a 7-year-old with whom maybe training, like you say, 2 times a week, probably at that age.
Yeah.
If they're getting back home at 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. By the time they've had their tea, get to bed, all that sort of stuff. The impact on a 7-year-old that's going to have on their education for the rest of their week is going to be pretty significant. Obviously, those demands grow and grow and grow as they go through an academy system. And I guess my concern is that the football becomes the priority. The education looks like the add-on. I think within the football setup, from what I've observed, the challenge is how do we maybe rebalance that so that education is the core, because that's the biggest gift we can give our children is a good education.
How do you marry up the educational system to the academy system?
We need to build a system whereby those children that fall out of the academies have a safe space to fall back into. And what does the programme for football look like? Can there be a games programme that schools like Bryanston are involved in, along with other schools that are in hubs in different areas around those football clubs, that those players who are part of those schools can then play in a league between themselves, so the academies are still in contact with them and they're still playing at a good level, and that can then spread nationally.
Richard's ideas around independent games programmes for released players got me thinking. Could it work across other schools? Fortunately, I knew someone already doing something similar. Mickey Adams has either played in or managed over 1,300 games. He now runs the football programme at Brookhouse College in Market Harbour.
Something like 170 kids, boys and girls, from the ages of 11 to 19. We've got 66 nationalities at the school. And the dream ultimately is to be a professional footballer. The parents have had the foresight really to send them to a school that cares about their educational pathways, but also to allow them to play football 5-6 days a week. You know, so we're combining the best of both worlds for them. I have to be creative with my pathways, and I've been out to places like Lithuania, Bulgaria, Finland recently, just to open up avenues for them if it doesn't happen in England.
We have a mantra which is 100% football, 100% education. So ultimately it's about the children fulfilling their potential, whether that be in the classroom, whether that be in the football pitch, or whether that be in a combination of the two.
We have a yearly tournament where we attract something like 20-25 scouts from clubs all around England that come to see our talents. We play showcase games against the pro sides as well. We want our kids to go on and have a trial.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by journalist and author Christina Patterson and the executive director of the Youth Endowment Fund, John Yates. Welcome both. Among the stories we'll be discussing this on the front of The Observer. Their headline, PM lays down Ukraine peace demand ahead of Trump talks. We'll be right back.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash.
Anyone of any age can say, I'll do that for £1 million and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes. Sky News, the full story first. I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
This is insane. This was a bustling residential area. I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa.
How difficult is this to police tonight? Off the scale.
I'm Dan Whitehead, Sky News' West of England and Wales correspondent.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm Katie Spencer and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent. As a team, we've interviewed some of the biggest stars in the world, the likes of Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, Sir Elton John. We try to give you an honest sense of how these people really are.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free, wherever you get your news. The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over. People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks. I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent. Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with journalist and author Christina Patterson and the executive director of the Youth Endowment Fund, John Yates. Let's take a quick look now at what is on some of those front pages. Well, The Observer leads with Ukraine and news that Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has told the US ahead of his visit there next week that Ukraine must be at the heart of any negotiations on a peace deal with Russia. Meanwhile, the Sunday Telegraph says he'll also tell Donald Trump that the UK is planning to boost its own defence spending faster than originally planned. The Sunday Times carries a warning from the Defence Secretary that what he calls an insecure peace for Ukraine will only lead to more war. The Sunday Mirror reports that a new breed of dangerous dog known as the Bully Kutta from Asia is becoming popular in the UK. The Mail on Sunday claims an exclusive with a report of how 2 police officers were apparently sent to interview a grandmother after she criticised Labour politicians on Facebook. The headline, "Come out, it's the thought police." The Sunday Express too is an exclusive, an interview with former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott, who says his country won't ditch the monarchy while William and Kate are alive because they're so popular. Another exclusive in The People, meanwhile, where a lawyer for victims of the Jeffrey Epstein case has reportedly asked the King to help them get justice by getting Prince Andrew to reveal everything he knows about what happened. The Prince himself has always firmly denied any involvement. The Sun on Sunday carries fresh allegations about the behaviour of TV chef Gino D'Acampo, made by a TV producer. And finally, The Star has bad news for men. Wives and girlfriends apparently think dogs are more reliable and smell better. I guess it depends on the dog and the man. We're joined tonight by Christina Patterson and John Yates. Thank you so much for joining us here for the press preview. Been quite a week, obviously. We've seen geopolitics, I guess as we knew it, slightly upended. And now we're looking ahead to this trip that Keir Starmer is making to the United States. A lot of the papers touching on that. If we start with The Observer, their headline is about that. The PM lays down Ukraine peace demand ahead of Trump talks. So apparently, according to this article, John, one of the key points will be that Ukraine has to be part of any negotiation.
Yeah, that's what's being briefed. I mean, this is a phenomenally difficult journey to Washington for the Prime Minister. I think it's probably the most significant journey since probably Tony Blair went over to meet George W. Bush. Yeah. And there's a huge amount at stake. I mean, obviously, we've got a attacking rolling army from Russia being held in Ukraine, but backed up by the US defence commitment, which may be at question. We've got potential 20% tariffs allegedly coming down the line. And Starmer needs to be a Trump whisperer, it would appear. He's going to have the charm. We're looking at Pamela Anderson's face on the front page. He's going to get the charm of Pamela Anderson, I think, to try and pull something off here. And he's not the obvious person to send in to charm Donald Trump. I mean, he's a man who's made his whole career, really, about being in defence of the law and international law. Someone who's a left-wing lawyer, as some people would call him. It's not the obvious person. So what can he do about it? I think what the story's saying is he's going to make a commitment to get to 2.5% of GDP on defence. I think that's a pretty sensible thing to do. We're not that far off it. It's about £5 to £6 billion extra a year. Not small money, but I think it's a good start. But we're going to have to all, I think, cross our fingers and wish the Prime Minister good luck.
Absolutely. Because, of course, Trump wants sort of 5%, which is probably unachievable.
Which even the US, of course.
Even the US. But, I mean, others are talking around 3.5. I mean, listen, who knows? John, you're saying that he's not the obvious person to send, but Donald Trump hasn't been too hostile to Sir Keir Starmer. I mean, he did say he liked him.
Well, I think my understanding is that they had a conversation when they both talked about their brothers having died, and I think that was how they bonded. So, as you say, John, lefty lawyer is not an obvious candidate, and of course Musk has been incredibly negative and hostile to Keir Starmer and essentially made it very clear he'd like to get rid of him. Of course, we don't know how far Trump and Musk's views echo and resonate with each other, but I mean, this has been a horrific week in geopolitics, absolutely horrific. I mean, many people have compared it to 1939, and I think that's accurate. I think we are absolutely at a pivot point globally. This is the first time that America has literally sided with our enemy and the enemy, the country that is meant to be its enemy, and has essentially it's upended the whole alliance of the West, the whole concept of the West, of Europe and America aligned on policy and the values it's meant to represent. That has been blown up. And I mean, actually, the whole thing is illogical, because the idea that we need to build up massive defences and hugely increase our spending, even though Putin is a pussycat and a really nice guy and didn't start the war in Ukraine, well, clearly there's a clash of logic there. If he's the bad guy, yes, let's say, of course, we do have to increase our spending. But the idea that Trump has sided with him and given away, as it seems, everything already, that he seems to be wanting to steal half of Ukraine's mineral wealth or more of it. And according to reports today, they are near to signing a deal. It's not clear exactly where those reports are coming from the White House, but they're certainly not coming from Ukraine.
So he mentioned it at the CPAC conference, Trump himself, a few hours ago, that a deal was close. We're hearing from other sources that Volodymyr Zelensky does not want to agree as things stand. So, we'll see. So it's not agreed yet, but certainly Trump is pushing it. But we've been talking about defence. Let's just look at the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. And John, you mentioned it earlier as well, of course, this need to increase defence and how that could be one of the things that that Keir Starmer takes to Trump. So what does the Sunday Telegraph say?
Yeah, so the Telegraph sort of lays it out and lays out that, for example, the Chancellor says she's already committed, and there's a strong sense that this 2.5% is going to happen. I think it also highlights just the cost of what we're talking about. So this is £6 billion a year.
And this is just going to 2.5.
That's just to get to 2.5%. Yeah. Now, I think we're going to have to end up getting closer to 3%. Now, then we're talking about £20 billion a year. Just to put that in context, that's like a third of the money we spend on all our schools. That is quite serious money. And it's not as though I can say, but don't worry, the economy's growing, but don't worry, there's quite a lot of fat left in public spending we can just cut, because we haven't done that recently. Or don't worry, we can always borrow more money. It's not really obvious where this money's going to come from. I think there's probably two choices, or two obvious things they can do. One is they can put taxes up, but they have promised they will not do it. I think they can't cut public spending. I don't think a Labour government can go into austerity 2.0. I think they're going to have to come up with some sort of line that says, look, this is an unusual moment. We're facing a significant military threat. We're going to do a temporary increase in borrowing, which is what was done during the Iraq War. But then we're going to have to cross our fingers and hope the bond market doesn't take over the country rather than Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, or announce a defence levy of some kind, you know, which obviously nobody would like. But it's one thing to promise not to raise taxes and quite another for Trump to break an 80-year-old alliance and say, right, you're on your own and Europe now has to defend itself, having given... You know, I mean, yes, there were some warnings, but not to this degree, not the idea that he would blow up the whole alliance. I think we are going to have to... The world has changed. That whole idea of a glasnost and the Cold War having gone, no, this is not a Cold War, it's a hot war, and it's about to get much hotter.
Well, which is sort of not exactly that, but what John Healey, the Defence Secretary, says in the Sunday Times is that basically we should get ready because an insecure peace risks more war. So that basically, you know, there's ending the war and then sort of winning the war when it comes to Ukraine. And Donald Trump seems keen on just kind of ending it one way or another.
Yeah.
What does John Healey say here?
Yeah, I think that the Defence Secretary is right. There's a danger... You know, Trump promised when he was campaigning, I'm going to end this war on day one. I think that is a slight difference from 39, by the way, because I'd say Trump has made a big thing out of I want to bring peace. I don't necessarily love the way the man tries to do it, but I don't think he is a warmonger as such. The danger is he just runs off. And you're left with a peace that just leads to another battle, to another war, to another war.
He may want peace, but if he, I mean, what he apparently wants, unbelievably, is a Nobel Peace Prize. But I mean, I think pretty much everybody, apart from Putin, wants people not to be dying in Ukraine. But that's not really the issue. The issue is that if you appease an aggressor who has essentially imperial and colonial intentions, and has made it very clear that he has designs on other countries. I mean, I would not want to be a Baltic nation if we get the kind of peace that Trump is talking about.
And I won't defend a man who's trying to eventually turn a peace negotiation to what's like a gangster heist running off of these mineral goods. But I am somewhat sympathetic to the Americans. I mean, they have been subsidising our defence for a very long period of time.
That's what he's been saying, that now Europe should be responsible.
And I think they benefit from actually having a united force with the UK and the rest of Europe, but at what price? I do think we need to spend more money on defence.
Yeah,
I think that is fair.
I do as well, but you don't do it this way.
I agree with that.
Christina, John, we're going to have to move on now. Coming up, police pay a visit to a grandmother, calling Labour councillors to resign over a WhatsApp scandal. More about that story on the front of the Mail, coming up next.
Sunday, the Premier League is exclusively on Peacock. The league's most dynamic scorers square off.
Goal for Haaland!
Erling Haaland and Man City. Mo Salah and Liverpool.
Time after time, here's Liverpool shining lights.
This is the Premier League.
That's just stunning!
Sunday, only on Peacock.
Paris reverberated to the sights, sounds and smells of conflict.
There's a focal point to all this anger, and that is Emmanuel Macron.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels.
There are dozens of people desperately clambering to get onto that boat. It is a chaotic scene, but it's being watched by dozens of French police officers on the beach.
I've reported on migration across Europe, close up on the ground, understanding that sense of desperation and meeting the criminal gangs behind it.
This old fishing boat set off from the Libyan port of Tobruk. There were 606 people who were on board.
So we've been distributing life jackets to all the people on board this boat, and now the first person is coming on board.
This is the ugly side of Italian football.
In Italy, everything is really organized.
Football's problems with hooliganism, racism were just dormant, and now they're back and they're getting worse. We cover so many countries, languages and cultures and work hard to gain trust to bring you the full story first.
Help is slowly reaching these places.
It's not just homes, but whole streets like this one that have been reduced to rubble and dust.
This is a picture of destruction.
Everywhere you look in this mountaintop community, there is absolute devastation.
These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again. Getting the chance to tell people's stories, it's a privilege.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people.
Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me now, journalist and author Christina Patterson and the executive director of the Youth Endowment Fund, John Yates. Let's go straight to the Mail on Sunday now. And their splash is come out, it's the Thought Police. And this is about police officers paying a visit to a grandmother because she had made some comments, I think, about Labour councillors. Christina, if you can start on this.
Yeah, so it's pretty sketchy on the detail, this one. So we don't know. They've said that no crime was committed. So we have to. So in that case, it's a bit baffling. I'm not sure why you would knock on someone's door for. I can't. It seems slightly unlikely that the police would go around just because she had criticised Labour councillors. We all criticise people in public. So I think
you should ask for the resignation of local councillors.
Well, I mean, I've never heard of police knocking on someone's door because someone had asked for their resignation. So I think we would need more detail on this. But certainly the general principle of how people conduct themselves on social media and what qualifies as a crime and what warrants a visit from the police is a very interesting one and a complex one. There have been some ridiculous examples of people being, hauled in for what seem like really minor criticisms, and particularly in relation to the whole trans area, where people get accused of transphobia simply for expressing a view that has been held throughout most of human history. But this one is sketchy on the detail. But I'm not anti. We do have a law against hate speech, and I have myself got somebody a prosecution under the Malicious Communications Act for their behaviour towards me online, and I think some of it does cross a line. So
I think that's where this law becomes very difficult. So this is technically a non-crime hate incident. And I think most of us are like, oh, for goodness sake, can't the police just fix some, proper problems? But we have laws in this country, for example, against stalking or harassment. Harassment is continuously pestering someone. And so how does the police know when you've crossed the line? But they have to record all the things up to the point you get to the line, which are non-crime hate incidents. Yeah. So, and the more stuff there is in social media, the more stuff that is like this. I think it's really tricky. I don't really want the police involved in any of this, but at the same time, I don't want people to be harassed. Yeah. And I don't know how to resolve that. This looks like madness, but we don't really know what this woman actually posted. And so...
Well, we'll see. But there's another story that is kind of linked to it. Sunday Telegraph, not linked to it, but the same theme or similar theme. Labour's AI tool will monitor social media amid free speech fears. So this is, AI that I guess will start snooping around your social media to find out if, you've said anything that you shouldn't have.
Yeah, well, AI is snooping around absolutely everything that's written on the internet, so no great surprise there. But this is about a particular contract that has been awarded to Faculty AI to build monitoring software which can search for foreign interference, detect deepfakes, and analyse social media narratives. Now, the ostensible point of it is to analyse threats, threats from foreign countries. And that, it seems to me, completely fair enough, And we still are not clear about whether, for example, Russia did interfere in the Brexit vote or not. It certainly looked like it, but the results were not definitive. So that sounds perfectly sensible. I mean, I think in the midst of all of this, we have to remember that actually all of, so, you know, the people who own the platforms, whether that's Zuckerberg, Musk or whoever, they've got access to all this information anyway. So it's really just a way for trawling through it, and it's like a Google search.
John, totally different story to end this chat on. Again, Sunday Telegraph. About food, public sector urged to serve British-grown food in meals. And so, yes, schools, hospitals and prisons to buy more British food makes sense.
Yeah, I have a slight period of my history where I was a special advisor to a cabinet minister, and this is the answer you give when they say, what can I do for free to make farmers like us again? Oh, well, how about we make all the schools have to buy lots of food from them? The trouble is, this is actually illegal, what they're hinting they're going to do. It's against the WTO, like, trade rules. You can't say, people may want them to be able to say, you can't say you can only buy British food. So what they'll end up saying is some sort of weak sort of guidance that you should be encouraged to look at food that is prepared with high welfare standards, which will include food from across the European Union. It's a good story. It's a good story, and everyone will like it who reads the Telegraph, and that's absolutely super. I suspect it will make absolutely no difference at all.
On that note, we're going to have to leave it. John Yates, Christina Patterson, thank you so much. I'll see you again in the next hour. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, we'll bring you the latest on the Pope, as the Vatican says he's in a critical condition tonight after he suffered what's described as a long asthmatic respiratory crisis. We'll bring you more at the top of the hour.